What would you do if your grandson watched you get handcuffed? Just for asking, why was I stopped? In the blistering heat of a California highway, a respected black attorney was slammed against his car in front of his 12-year-old nephew. No warning, no rights read, no explanation. This isn't fiction. This is America. And what happened next turned a courtroom into a battlefield, where law wasn't just quoted, it was wielded like a sword. This story will shake you, because if a man with a Harvard law degree can be dragged off like a criminal, what chance do the rest of us have? If you've been watching from the beginning, drop a comment below. I'm here, I'm listening. Your voice matters, and in this video, you'll see how one man's refusal to stay silent gave all of us a reason to speak up again. The sun scorched the asphalt along Highway 99, just outside of Fresno, California. Heat waves shimmered like ghosts over the cracked two-lane road, and the dashboard clock in Jordan Miles's car blinked 11:52 a.m. The air conditioner hummed weakly, coughing out lukewarm air. Jordan, a 39-year-old black attorney with a calm yet determined face, kept both hands firmly on the wheel. His light gray shirt was damp with sweat, but his focus wasn't on the heat. It was on the precious cargo beside him. His 12-year-old nephew, Ethan, dressed in a white dress shirt and clip-on tie, nervously clutching his math binder. They were running tight but still on time. Ethan was scheduled to check in for the National Math Olympiad, a rare chance for only a dozen students in California. A win today would qualify him for the national team. Jordan had promised his late sister that no matter what, he would get Ethan there. Then came the flash of red and blue in the rearview mirror. Jordan's hands tightened instinctively on the steering wheel. "Stay calm," he said softly. Ethan looked up, confused. "Did we do something wrong, Uncle Jordan?" The siren chirped once, sharp, dry. Jordan pulled over, heart beating harder. A white patrol officer, broad-shouldered, walked toward the car with slow, deliberate steps. His badge read, "Ryan Cotter, Sheriff's Department." His mirrored sunglasses didn't hide the dismissiveness in his face. No greeting, no explanation, just a barked order. "Step out of the vehicle. Show me your documents." Jordan didn't flinch. "May I ask why I've been stopped, officer?" His tone was calm, steady, not combative, but Cotter's lip curled into a smirk like he had just been challenged. "Asking questions now? You folks never learn." Without another word, Cotter yanked open the door. "Out, now!" Ethan gasped, clutching his backpack tighter. Jordan stepped out slowly, hands visible. "I'm a licensed attorney. My papers are in the glove," but he didn't get to finish. Cotter shoved him against the hood of the car. The metal was scorching hot, searing through Jordan's shirt as Cotter roughly twisted his arms behind his back. The click of the handcuffs was louder than the highway wind. Inside the car, Ethan's muffled scream, "Uncle Jordan!" cut through the blistering air like a knife. The boy's fists pounded the locked car door as tears streamed down his cheeks. But Cotter didn't look back. He didn't even flinch. He didn't care. And in that moment, everything changed. A man on his way to a math competition suddenly found himself reduced to a suspect, with no warning, no reason, and no mercy. If you're still here, if you're listening, comment below. I'm here, I remember. Because this isn't just about one man. It's about how quickly dignity can be stripped away. When asking why becomes a threat. The room was cold, not from temperature, but from design. A single buzzing fluorescent light cast a pale glow on the metal chair bolted to the floor. Jordan Miles sat with his wrists cuffed to the armrests. The sweat from the Fresno highway had dried into stiff patches on his shirt. No one had offered him water. No one had spoken to him since Cotter shoved him into the backseat of the cruiser. There were no windows, no clock, no lawyer, and most disturbingly, no Miranda rights ever read. For Jordan, this wasn't just unlawful, it was deliberate. He breathed slowly, evenly. That breath was his shield. It had taken years to train his body not to react. As a black man and as someone who knew the law inside and out, he understood this wasn't the time to shout. It was the time to observe. Every detail mattered now. This wasn't about justice, it was about survival. Outside, he could hear muffled voices, laughter even, casual, indifferent. Someone passed the door. No glance, No acknowledgement. He wasn't a human being in here. He was a problem to be processed. 10 years ago, Jordan had found himself in a similar room. Back then, he was a top law student at Harvard. He had submitted a legal blog post dissecting a police brutality case. Clear constitutional violations, caught on a security cam. Days later, a mysterious plagiarism accusation popped up. A scholarship vanished. A recommendation withheld. He had asked too many questions back then, too. And now here he was again. He looked at the blank wall ahead and quietly mouthed the words, "You will not bury me twice." A sharp click. The door opened. A uniformed officer entered. Young, no more than 30. No name tag, no clipboard. He placed a water bottle on the table and left without a word. The door locked behind him with a hollow metal clang. Jordan didn't touch the water. Not because he feared being poisoned, but because he knew the rules of the game. If anyone wanted to claim he had lost control, they would look for signs. Agitation, dehydration, instability. His silence and clarity were his last armor. Then came the sound he was expecting. Voices behind the wall, one male, one female. The tone of strategy, not procedure. He caught only fragments. Don't need a conviction. Just make sure he's discredited. He stirred things up before. Yale, remember? Jordan's heartbeat slowed as he listened carefully. This was not just a bad arrest. It was a coordinated takedown. He recognized the name Lieutenant Colonel Gerald Traynor, mentioned quietly, like a shadow. A figure never mentioned publicly, but known within legal circles for overseeing containment strategies after civil unrest. If Traynor was involved, this wasn't a random stop. Jordan was being neutralized, silently, systematically. And Ethan? Where had they taken the boy? The thought made Jordan's jaw tighten. They had torn a child from the one adult he trusted, all because Jordan asked a question. He looked down at his wrist, where the key had rubbed the skin raw. A small cut had formed. He studied it, not with pain, but with focus. This too was evidence, just like the timestamp from the moment of the arrest. He remembered checking the clock. 12:08 p.m. The arrest report would likely say something different. It always did. That difference, a 20-minute lie, could be the thread that unraveled everything. Jordan had seen cases dismissed over smaller inconsistencies. He didn't need a miracle. He just needed the truth, backed by precision. And he knew how to find both. There was a knock, then another officer stepped in. This one wasn't dressed in uniform. A plain navy blazer, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Miles," he said flatly, "you'll be moved to holding in 30 minutes pending further review. No outside contact, no attorney access. State orders." "Under what statute?" Jordan asked, voice calm. The man paused. "Protocol 14D." Jordan blinked once. He knew that code. It was meant for high-profile detentions deemed sensitive to state integrity. Used post-9/11, used for terrorism, and now used on a civil rights attorney trying to take his nephew to a math competition? He exhaled slowly. "Thank you," he replied quietly. The man looked puzzled but said nothing and left. Jordan leaned back. This wasn't just a mistake. This was a setup. If you're still with me, still listening, drop a comment below. I see the setup. Because the only way out of silence is for someone to start speaking. The cell was still. The only sound came from a flickering bulb that buzzed like a tired wasp. Jordan Miles sat on the edge of the quay, his hands now free but red-ringed from hours in cuffs. He hadn't been charged. He hadn't been processed. He had simply been placed, like a misplaced file in a locked drawer. He rubbed his wrist slowly, remembering another time his skin had been marked by metal. 10 years ago, a similar burn circled his arm. He had been 29, a standout legal mind at Harvard Law, often praised for his clear thinking and commanding courtroom presence, even as a student. But that wasn't what people remembered. What they remembered was how quickly he disappeared after speaking out. He'd found a grainy video from East Boston, body cam footage that mysteriously never made the public archive. A young black man was face down on the pavement, arms spread, compliant. An officer, stocky, aggressive, struck him anyway. Jordan had shared the footage on a student forum, adding a legal critique. This is not policing, this is punishment. Within 2 weeks, he was under investigation. An anonymous plagiarism accusation. A committee hearing behind closed doors. A young officer from California showed up to offer background on Jordan's temperament. His name? Ryan Cotter. Jordan never forgot the sneer. He'd spoken out, and the system had spoken back. That memory now flickered beside the present moment, like overlapping transparencies in an old projector. It wasn't just Cotter at that traffic stop. It was the same man from a decade earlier. This wasn't personal vendetta. This was institutional memory, the system's way of swatting back anyone who dared shine a light inside. Jordan stood and began pacing the small space, a habit from trial prep days. His mind snapped into structure. He began to list what he knew. The stop was unprovoked. The timestamp would not match the evidence. A minor child had been separated from his guardian without explanation. And Cotter was involved again. But now, there was something new. Something bigger. Protocol 14D. That wasn't standard procedure. That was a military aligning clause buried in the Department of Homeland Security handbook. It meant his name was on a list, not because of what he did on that highway, but because of who he had been for too long. A man who asked questions publicly. He sat again, heart heavy, not from fear, but from anger smoothed over by years of practice. This wasn't happening because he'd broken the law. It was happening because he remembered it too well. Suddenly, there was a knock. The door opened slowly. A uniformed officer stepped inside, but not one Jordan recognized. He looked older, gray at the temples, a hard look in his eyes. "Mr. Miles," the officer said, voice low, "I shouldn't be here long, but I saw your name on the sheet and..." He hesitated, then added, "I used to know someone who stood up like you did. He's not here anymore." Jordan studied him. "What's your name, officer?" A pause. "Baramian." "Doesn't matter. What matters is you've stirred something. Word is you're being discredited, not tried. Same play they used on Sloan. You remember that name?" Jordan's eyes narrowed. Douglas A. Sloan, Internal Affairs. A whistleblower. A man who once exposed misconduct inside Oakland PD, then vanished. File closed, departure called voluntary. "I thought that was just rumor," Jordan said. The officer shook his head. "It's not, and his signature just showed up on your arrest paperwork. Problem is, Sloan's been gone for 7 years. No contact, no jurisdiction." Jordan's chest tightened. They'd used a dead man's name. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. The officer shrugged. "Because someday I might be the one in your chair. And when that day comes, I want to believe someone like you made it out." He left without another word. Jordan sat still. That moment, that gift of truth, struck harder than any gavel. This wasn't just a flawed arrest. It was a cover-up with ghosts. Jordan pulled his knees close, hands folded. If you're still watching, still following this man's fight, comment, "I remember Sloan." Because this chapter isn't about shouting louder. It's about listening deeper. It's about the men they try to erase and the quiet records they leave behind. The courtroom felt colder than the holding cell, not because of the air conditioning, but because of what it represented. Stone walls, high ceilings, a judge's bench raised like a throne. Justice, in theory. But Jordan Miles had long learned that theory often crumbled beneath reality. He stood tall beside the defendant's table. No public defender, no private lawyer, just him, and a folder, worn and creased, filled with the truth. Across the aisle sat Prosecutor Melissa Crane, a woman in her early 50s, sharp-suited, her blonde hair pulled tightly into a bun. She looked like someone who had never been late for a meeting, never spilled coffee on her brief. But her eyes betrayed something else. She had seen the file. She knew this was not a routine hearing. Judge Harrison, an aging man with a gravel-toned voice and a stern face, glanced over his glasses. "Mr. Miles, are you sure you wish to represent yourself in this matter?" "Yes, Your Honor," Jordan said, his voice even. Melissa Crane gave a small smirk, but it didn't last. Jordan stepped forward. "I request the right to file a pretrial motion regarding the accuracy of the arrest report, particularly the timestamp recorded and the identity of the listed witness." The judge arched an eyebrow. "Proceed with caution, Mr. Miles." Jordan opened the folder. Inside was a printed still from a traffic cam, clearly showing his car at 12:06 p.m. crossing Smith Junction, nowhere near the alleged stop at 11:42 a.m. He held it up. This image was pulled from the city of Fresno's intelligent traffic signal system. "The vehicle in motion is mine. Timestamp verified. I have requested chain of custody documentation from the Transportation Department." The courtroom was silent. Then he held up a second page. "This is the arrest record filed by Officer Ryan Cotter. Note the timestamp, 11:42 a.m. It predates the image by 24 minutes. Melissa rose. "Your Honor, minor discrepancies in time are not uncommon." Jordan cut in gently but firmly. 24 minutes is not minor. It's the difference between evidence existing and being wiped." He turned to the gallery where a few early spectators watched closely. "Public surveillance footage in Fresno is stored for 24 hours, but retrieval requires exact timestamp requests. Had I not known to ask for 12:06, this footage would have been deleted, and the false report would stand alone." Judge Harrison leaned forward. "That is a serious accusation." Jordan nodded. "It's not an accusation, it's a fact." Then came the next blow. He unfolded another page. "This is the signature of Douglas A. Sloan, listed as witness on my report." The name sent a shiver through the older spectators. "Sloan left the department in 2016, Jordan continued. "I reached out to the Ethics Commission. He has no current contract, no record of departmental access, no legal capacity to validate an arrest." Melissa interrupted again. "Objection. This is circumstantial, Your Honor." But Jordan turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I'm asking the court, if a man left law enforcement 7 years ago, how is his name on an arrest he never saw?" The judge raised a hand, silencing both sides. He looked at the evidence, then at the prosecutor. "Ms. Crane, can you verify Mr. Sloan's involvement?" Melissa didn't answer right away. Then finally, "We will have to verify the records." The gallery shifted. Someone whispered. A journalist in the back began taking notes faster. Jordan wasn't done. "I also submit a signed affidavit from a retired sergeant, Andre Kessler, who confirms Cotter's pattern of false reporting and Sloan's prior attempts to investigate misconduct. Those documents are with the court clerk." Judge Harrison sat back in his chair. "This court is calling for a recess. All submitted materials will be sealed and reviewed by Internal Affairs before this case proceeds." Jordan nodded, but he knew what had just happened. The courtroom, once tilted entirely against him, had shifted. Not by volume, not by rage, by proof. And behind him in the second row, a familiar face appeared. Ethan. The boy's white shirt was wrinkled now, his face tired but focused. Their eyes met for a moment. Jordan didn't smile, didn't wave, but he stood taller. Because this was what Ethan needed to see. Not vengeance, not violence, but a man standing in the middle of a courtroom, armed with only the truth. If you're watching this now and you're still listening, comment "Truth has a timestamp." Because in a world where lies come dressed in badges and forms, the truth shows up in ink, in images, in silence that speaks louder than words. The second day of the hearing began not with a bang, but with the stillness that buzzed beneath the skin. The courtroom was more crowded now, not just with reporters and legal observers, but with ordinary citizens, retired teachers, Vietnam veterans, mothers clutching handbags with trembling fingers. People who'd lived long enough to know that truth, once buried, rarely resurfaces, unless someone refuses to stop digging. Jordan Miles walked into the courtroom alone. No lawyer, no entourage, but he walked taller than he had the day before. His steps were deliberate, shoulders squared, not in defiance but in quiet dignity. The first to meet his eyes was Ethan, sitting beside his mother. The boy nodded slightly, hands folded in his lap. Jordan gave the faintest nod back. There were no words needed between them anymore. Judge Harrison entered, his black robe moving like a curtain being drawn before a final act. He didn't waste time. "Mr. Miles," he said, "you may proceed with your cross-examination." Jordan rose. At the witness stand sat Officer Ryan Cotter, still in full uniform, his nameplate catching the light like it had something to prove. His expression was unreadable, but his knuckles were pale where they gripped the armrests. Officer Cotter, Jordan began, voice calm. Do you recall your interaction with me on May 12th of this year? Cotter's jaw tightened. Yes. You stated in your report that I was stopped at 11:42 a.m. on suspicion of erratic driving. Is that correct? That's what I wrote. Jordan took a breath. Is that also the truth? Cotter hesitated. It was an estimate. My dashboard clock may have been fast. Jordan stepped closer to the evidence projector. He displayed two images, one from the traffic cam, timestamped 12:06 p.m., and one from a bystander's video, timestamped 12:10, showing Jordan already in handcuffs. Can you explain, Jordan asked, how I was still driving at 12:06 if your report says I was stopped before noon? Cotter's eyes narrowed. I can't explain every minute. There was confusion. Confusion, Jordan repeated, his tone neutral. And would that same confusion explain the appearance of a signature from a man who hasn't worked in law enforcement since 2016? Silence. Jordan held up the witness report bearing Douglas A. Sloan's name. Did you personally speak with Mr. Sloan before listing him as a corroborating witness? Cotter swallowed hard. I was told the report needed a supervisor's sign-off. I assumed it was done. By whom? I don't recall. Jordan didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply turned to the judge. No further questions, Your Honor. But it wasn't the words that shook the room. It was Cotter's silence, his pauses, his evasions. They were louder than any confession. When Jordan returned to his table, a soft ripple of murmurs moved through the gallery. Not applause, not excitement, but recognition that something had just cracked. Prosecutor Melissa Crane rose next. She attempted to redirect the court's attention toward pattern of behavior, toward resisting lawful authority, toward anything but the mounting evidence that Cotter's report had more holes than a fishing net. But the room no longer leaned in her direction, because truth, once given breath, refuses to be silenced. Then came the moment no one expected. From the back row, a man stood up, mid-50s, plain clothes, eyes tired but resolute. Your Honor, he said, holding up a small USB. My name is Martin Cruz. I live near Smith Junction. I have dash cam footage from that day. I wasn't going to get involved, but I saw the kid's face in the car, and I couldn't sleep since. The court stirred. Judge Harrison waved the bailiff forward. The USB was inserted. The screen lit up. There it was, Jordan's car, slowing to a cautious stop. No weaving, no violation, just a calm man and a child inside. Then Cotter's cruiser appears. He approaches the car, taps the hood, mutters something, barely audible but clear enough. Mark it 47. Jordan froze because that phrase wasn't random. M code 47 was an internal police alert code used when an officer believed a situation might escalate into non-compliance. It allowed preemptive use of force under departmental policy. Jordan stood slowly. Your Honor, I move to submit this video as evidence. It confirms premeditated escalation and use of force under false pretenses. Judge Harrison turned to Melissa Crane, but she didn't object. She didn't even move. The courtroom had heard it all. Cotter's deception, Sloan's ghost signature, a child's terror behind a locked car door, and now an officer triggering a code to justify force when there was no threat at all. Jordan exhaled, not in triumph, but in release. If you're still with me, if you're still hearing this story, comment, I saw the code. Because this isn't about a courtroom anymore. This is about what happens when power thinks no one is watching. Chapter 6, the courthouse was silent. Not with peace, but with tension so thick it clung to the ceiling like mist. Every pair of eyes was now focused, not on the judge, not on the prosecutor, not even on Officer Cotter, but on the man who stood without a lawyer and built a case with nothing but paper, timing, and truth. Jordan Miles sat quietly at the defense table. Not a single muscle in his face moved, but his heart beat like a hammer against stone. He hadn't won, not yet. But the walls that once pressed against him had begun to tremble, and now the system was cracking from the inside. Judge Harrison took a long pause. He leaned toward the mic, his voice firm. Given the content of the newly submitted video and the inconsistencies in Officer Cotter's testimony, this court is ordering an immediate review by the Office of Internal Affairs. Further, the use of M Code 47 without verbal de-escalation will be reviewed under civil rights policy violations. Gasps swept through the room. Melissa Crane stood up quickly, but her voice lacked its usual control. Your Honor, I request a stay of proceedings until a full departmental investigation can be concluded. Jordan stood too. Your Honor, I object. Justice delayed is often justice denied. I request the court consider dismissal based on prosecutorial misconduct and procedural fabrication. The judge tapped his gavel once. Enough, he said quietly but powerfully. This court is not a battlefield, but neither will it be a shield for abuse. He leaned back. We will recess for 48 hours. During that time, I expect full cooperation from the district attorney's office in reviewing Officer Cotter's case record and the history of witness signatures. Mr. Miles, you may remain released under recognizance. The gavel came down again, harder this time. People stood, some whispered, others wiped tears. Jordan turned to see Ethan walking east toward him, now bold enough to move without looking for permission. Uncle Jordan, the boy said, his voice soft but steady, you didn't yell, you didn't punch, but you hit harder than anyone. Jordan dropped to one knee, facing him at eye level. Come, it's not about noise, Ethan, he said. It's about knowing when to speak and how. Ethan nodded, then behind them a woman approached, gray hair in a bun, eyes rimmed with age and pain. My grandson, she said, was taken last year. No camera, no lawyer, just vanished into the process. Thank you for showing the rest of us it isn't hopeless. Jordan nodded, too moved to speak. Outside, reporters clamored. Microphones reached like branches. But Jordan didn't speak to them. Not yet. He wasn't done inside. Back in the court's admin wing, a new motion was quietly filed. One that referenced at least 15 prior cases tied to M-code misuse, all bearing the signature of either Officer Cotter or his direct unit. Lauren Berkeley's name showed up twice in fast-track charges, and deep in the footnotes, a clause. Suspicion of pattern-based discriminatory policing targeting male black defendants ages 18 to 40. The courthouse system was reeling, and somewhere deep within the state records office, someone flagged a file for urgent audit. Because when a single man stands, others start reading more closely. If you're watching this right now, comment, "No shield for abuse." Because some truths don't arrive on fire. Some truths wear a tie, hold up a form, and wait patiently to be heard. And Jordan Miles was not done being heard. The 48 hours that followed felt like a drumbeat echoing through the heart of Fresno. News vans lined the courthouse perimeter. Editorials began to circulate with headlines like, "Can a single voice reform a system?" and "Jordan Miles, the calm storm." Inside the court's administrative halls, an urgent review was underway. Internal Affairs had reopened 5 of Officer Cotter's prior arrests, all flagged with irregularities. Meanwhile, the legal division traced the witness name Douglas A. Sloan back to 3 more case files, each filed post-2016, each signed but none verified. The morning of the resumed hearing arrived with an electric stillness. Inside the courtroom, there was a different energy now. The gallery wasn't just watching, it was waiting. Judge Harrison entered. He didn't carry a stack of papers, just one folder. "This court," he said, "has reviewed the submitted evidence, testimonies, and newly audited records. Officer Cotter has been placed on administrative leave pending further investigation. The witness name used in Mr. Miles's file has been deemed falsified." He paused, scanning the courtroom. "Furthermore, the prosecution has submitted a motion to dismiss all charges against Mr. Miles, citing material procedural misconduct and compromised evidence." A murmur spread. Melissa Crane stood slowly. Her face bore none of its usual steel. "Your Honor, the state formally retracts its claims and expresses regret for the procedural breakdown that led to Mr. Miles's arrest." Jordan didn't move. He looked at the judge, not with triumph, but with clarity. Judge Harrison continued, "Mr. Miles, this court recognizes your right to speak. You may make a final statement if you wish." Jordan stood. He took a breath. "Thank you, Your Honor. I won't speak long, because this case was never just about me. It was about what happens when silence becomes a strategy, not just for survival, but for control, when process replaces people, when policy forgets compassion. He turned to the gallery, to every elder who feared the badge more than the crime, to every parent who taught their child not to reach for anything too fast, to every young person who asked, "What do I say when they stop me?" This was for you. Then he paused, not to fight the law, but to remind it who it's meant to serve. A silence settled that no gavel could cut. Judge Harrison gave a nod. "This court session is closed. Mr. Miles, you are free to go." As Jordan gathered his things, he felt a small hand slide into his. "Ethan." "Uncle," the boy whispered, "you didn't just win, you changed the room." Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed, but Jordan didn't stop. Not for interviews, not for applause. He walked down the courthouse steps with Ethan beside him, toward a future neither of them had to fear anymore. If you watch this far, comment, "Silence is not safety." Because when you stand long enough, sometimes the whole world learns to listen. The sun shone differently that morning. It wasn't warmer or brighter, just steadier, more certain. For the first time in a long while, Jordan Miles felt like time wasn't pressing against him. He wasn't rushing to prove something or shield someone. He was simply walking, with his nephew beside him and a day ahead with no shadows chasing him. Back in South Fresno, a small building stood at the corner of Cedar and Huntington. Its paint was fading, but the windows were clean, and a new sign had just gone up: Miles Community Law and Rights Center. There was no ribbon-cutting ceremony, no press, just neighbors. An older black man in a wheelchair rolled up the ramp, clutching a folded ticket for a citation he'd never understood. A Latina mother with her teenage son waited in a plastic chair. A white veteran with a faded cap walked in holding a worn manila envelope. And Jordan? He greeted each of them like they were family, because in a way they were. "You don't need to know all the codes," he told a woman worried about housing papers. "You just need to know you have a right to ask." In a small room behind the desk, Ethan sat with a few younger kids from his school, drawing diagrams on a whiteboard. "My uncle says math and law both have rules," he told them. "You just gotta learn where they bend." The center wasn't big, just 2 rooms, some chairs, a printer that worked on a good day. But its heart was strong. Words spread quietly, not through ads, but through whispers. "Go talk to Jordan. He listens. He explains. He doesn't make you feel small." Within a month, the city council received its highest influx of civilian legal queries in years. People were citing their rights in meetings. Community forums began asking local officers tougher questions. And a new rule was quietly drafted. Every traffic stop in Fresno would now require body cam verification to validate citations. Jordan never claimed credit. When reporters finally caught up to him again, asking if he planned to run for office or write a book, he laughed gently. "No, I just want people to stop whispering the truth like it's a crime." One evening as the center was closing, Jordan stood by the window and watched Ethan lock the door. The boy turned, now taller, more sure. "Uncle," he asked, "was it worth it? Everything you went through?" Jordan didn't answer right away. He looked around the room, the flyers on the wall, the books, the laughter that had just faded into the evening. And he nodded. "Yeah, because you don't teach the world with shouting. You teach it by staying, by standing, by never backing down from the quiet moments where truth gets its voice. If you're still here, still watching, still reading, leave a comment. Truth doesn't whisper. It waits. Because maybe the greatest change doesn't come from verdicts or headlines. Maybe it comes from a room with plastic chairs and a man who finally got to finish his sentence. And maybe that's enough to start something that never ends.